Welcome to this podcast designed to help you navigate the world of disability through interviews, game shows, and in this case, the scholarly perspective partly responsible for inspiring a new site-specific theater production. I'm your host, Rena Cohn, former artistic director of Vancouver's Real Wheels Theater. And with me today is Alfia Badalova, a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy at University of British Columbia. Alfia holds a PhD in disability studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Her research interests include sociology of disability, disability policy and advocacy, and cross-cultural understandings of disability. She's also passionate about disability arts and culture. We're going to be talking about the performative nature of disability. Welcome, Alfia.
Hi, Rena. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for such a lovely introduction.
Such a pleasure to have you with us. So let's start at the very beginning and how we define disability today.
Yes, well, for a long time, people with disabilities and disabled people, and I use both to account for different ways the disability community self identifies, were forced into narrow definitions devised by medical professionals.
Right.
And such definitions became not only diagnostic, but also a way to view the personhood and humanity of people with disabilities.
You're talking about the medical model of disability, which treated disability as a problem to be solved.
Exactly. A problem belonging to the individual and their body mind rather than a societal issue. Fortunately, that definition has shifted over time.
Alfia, can you talk about that shift?
Yes, well, firstly, it shifted only as a result of a lot of work done by people with disabilities over a long period of time. And the disability community today justifiably insists on applying the social model of disability. And the social model says that people are disabled by barriers in society, not by the medical condition. And barriers can be attitudinal or physical, like non accessible elevators, toilets.
It's the environment that's disabling.
Exactly. And I want to say, given this podcast is hosted by Real Wheels, a theater company, a lot of this work has been happening in the realm of arts and culture through representation of people with a lived experience.
Hooray for the arts paving the way, Alfia.
That's right. By telling our own story, we offer an alternative to the medicalized views of disability without denying or minimizing our limitations.
Now, if reclaiming the disability narrative on cultural platforms includes storytelling, then our words or choice of words are really going to matter.
Words are so important. When we use words that associate disability with an anomaly, a loss, a pity, we normalize phrases like turning a blind eye, confined to a wheelchair, and my personal favorite, lame.
Right.
Language isn't neutral. It's also about aligning our values with our words. The same goes for some euphemisms, where, for example, people replace the word disability with differently abled. And in their view, that's less offensive. However, in reality, it's a devaluation of disability experience and an assertion that if only we call it something else, disability will disappear.
Let's talk a bit about invisible disabilities, because when people think of disability, oftentimes the first thing that comes to mind is a wheelchair.
Yes, and some of it has to do with the prevalence of the international symbol of disability, the wheelchair, used as a catch all. With more people embracing their disability identity, especially when it's invisible, this popular symbol distracts us from thinking about disability in more complex, nuanced ways. And just because someone doesn't readily look like that symbol doesn't mean their disability experiences are invalid.
Ooh, invalid. Now, there's an interesting word.
Yes, invalid. And the term invalid is still widely used to refer to people with disabilities in some countries, including Russia, where I'm from. The word legitimizes deeply embedded associations between disability and not being seen.
Alfia, this seems like the perfect segue for you to share some of your own story.
Of course, back when I was adjusting to my life as an amputee, I was still a very shy teenager. Not only I was very conscious of my limp as a prosthetic user, I was also paranoid about whether it looked like a real leg. My concerns fed off my internal insecurities, but also by people's stares. And people with disabilities have been invisible in Russia or what used to be the USSR. In fact, When a Soviet official was asked if Russia would host the Paralympic Games in conjunction with the 1980 Olympics in Moscow, he said, "There are no invalids in the USSR."
В Советском Союзе нету инвалидов.
I think it was that environment that pressured me to pass and blend in as much as I could. When I look back at it, my attempt at passing really illustrates my own internalized ableism.
But academia was your lifesaver, wasn't it?
Yep.
Can you share some examples from your studies that resonated for you personally?
Sure. For example, staring goes back to the freak show when people with disabilities were used for circus entertainment. Over time and through disability arts and culture, people with disabilities started reclaiming staring and using it as a way to challenge the social perceptions and stigmas.
I love that. And you studied under a performance artist at one point, didn't you?
I did. Carrie Sandel.
Carrie Sandel.
Carrie's an academic and a performance artist. In one of my favorite performances, Carrie walks outside wearing a lab coat and white pants, completely covered in red text, as well as drawings of a spinal cord and hip bones. As she encounters people's stares, she hands them a paper that details her medical history. The text on her clothing includes common comments and questions she experiences in her everyday life, such as, "Are you contagious?" Or, I bet the Easter seals could help you." Or, "Do you ever dream that you're normal?" She presents herself covered with the script of a medical chart and invites her audience to examine and read her medical history, revealing to participants the cultural views that diminish the disabled person to a medical diagnosis only.
The disability experience is far more fluid than society recognizes.
Exactly. People with disabilities often aren't binary. So when a person who uses a wheelchair to get into the library then stands up to reach a book, or a person who is blind compliments someone's dress, it challenges binary notions that your disability is either 100% or 0%. This leads us to the concept of the disability masquerade, which is about exposing false binaries, and the performative nature of disability in managing preset notions of how disability should be.
The disability masquerade. Now, in that respect, is it used for the benefit of the able-bodied public, but not so helpful to the individual with disability?
The masquerade is often a response to systemic barriers. And because it's so exhausting to constantly explain what your access needs are and be exposed to ignorance and reluctance to meet these needs, some people simply ignore them.
Which can do harm.
Unfortunately. And another harmful mainstream cliche is inspiration porn.
The infamous inspiration porn.
A term coined by the late Australian disability advocate Stella Young. It's when a narrative portrays disabled people sentimentally or as objects of pity, fawning over an uplifting moral message about disability, primarily aimed at non-disabled viewers.
In contrast to the play we're developing at Real Wheels,
which translates some of these ideas into artistic form that foregrounds the voices of people with disabilities. Oftentimes, research is hard to translate into something accessible, and I really appreciate the arts and especially theater's ability to make these ideas more engaging.
Althea, it's been so great speaking with you.
My pleasure.
And many thanks to our listeners. We invite you to tune in again for other podcasts hosted by Real Wheels Theatre as people with disabilities rewrite and own their own stories.
This podcast is a production of Real Wheels Theatre, an award-winning Vancouver-based theatre company with a mandate to deepen understanding of disability. You've just listened to one of our 4-part podcast series. We invite you to listen to the other 3. These short podcasts range from silly and lighthearted to seriously academic. The podcasts were written, interviewed, and performed by Amy Amonte, Althea Badalova, Emily Grace Brooke, Rena Cohen, Andrew Lawrenson, and Casper Ryan. These podcasts were produced and directed for Real Wheels by Rena Cohen, with technical production by Kimit Sekon. Thanks to Canada Council for the Arts, BC Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver for financial support. Special thanks to Cadence Konopaki and Mark Ash. We hope you enjoyed this Real Wheels podcast. we invite you to drop us a line at info@realwheels.ca or visit us on Facebook or Instagram. Be sure to listen to the other 3, and thanks for listening.